The idea that the Old Testament must be read literally can be traced to the beliefs of Marcion in the 2nd century, who, according to a remark by Origen, prohibited allegorical interpretations of the scripture. Literally believing that the God in the Old Testament destroyed his enemies just as told, and nearly exterminating even all life on earth, Marcion proposed a bizarre theology in which there were two gods, or a dual God. Not only are there unresolvable differences with the archaeological record and scientific knowledge, but the literal reading of the Old Testament adopted by religious fundamentalists is also difficult to reconcile with some Christian beliefs, for example with Christ's turning the other cheek. Rather than reading the Old Testament literally, the Apostolic Churches, the Roman Catholic and the Orthodox, interpret the Old Testament in a manner that is consistent with the Christian faith. In this presentation, I will examine the story of Noah's flood from the Old Testament, and especially what its literal reading would seem to claim, that story presenting a good example of why the Old Testament cannot be read literally, but only in the context of economia. Genesis 7, the story of the great flood. Then the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and its mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and its mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the air, also male and female, to keep their kind alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. In the literal reading, we do not have Logos, Christ, or a Trinity, but a single monistic God, the God in whom St. Paul might have believed before his conversion to Christianity. This God speaks with a voice, anthropomorphically, as a pagan God might. He tells Noah that he has 7 days in which to make a boat big enough to house the hundreds of thousands of species of land animals spread across the surface of the earth, across 7 continents. Within those 7 days, Noah must collect a pair or 7 pairs of each species of land animal, including birds. The list of animals is not comprehensive. Fish and invertebrates are not explicitly indicated, and all kingdoms apart from animals such as bacteria, protists, archaea, fungi, and plants are missing from the list. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came on the earth. And Noah with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came on the earth. In this account, which is not quite consistent with the previous paragraph, 7 days had passed after the completion of the task of building the ark and collecting the animals, so the animals were presumably for 7 days in the ark before the rain began. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah with his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons, entered the ark, they and every wild animal of every kind, and all domestic animals of every kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every bird of every kind. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. Noah, according to the scriptures, lived after Abraham, and Abraham had been born in Ur. The city of Ur dates from about 3800 BC, that is the presumed date of its foundation, so Noah's flood must have occurred after that time. If read literally, we should expect a flood that occurred following that time to have destroyed all ecosystems and all human settlements all over the earth. There is no evidence for such a destructive event. The flood continued 40 days on the earth, and the waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters swelled and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. The waters swelled so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters swelled above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep, about 7 meters. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, domestic animals, wild animals, all swarming creatures that swarm the earth, and all human beings. Everything on dry land, in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, human beings and animals and creeping things and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. And the waters swelled on the earth for 150 days. This account of the flood parallels another account from Assyrian mythology, in which a man called Atrahasis is warned by one of the Assyrian gods that the other gods will send a flood to destroy life on earth. It will rain for 7 days, and the land will be fully covered in water. The hero of that myth is advised to make a boat in order to save his family and his farm animals. He later boasts to the Assyrian gods that thanks to his action, life on earth had been preserved, and pleased that he should not be punished. It is not a historical record of a flood, such that in the reign of so-and-so it rained for 7 days, and there was much devastation. It is an actual myth, with very similar elements to those found in the Bible, and a similar conclusion, that life on earth and the only pious family had been saved from destruction. Apart from one God versus many, and of 40 days of rain rather than 7 days, the main substantial difference is that in our story of Noah's flood, Noah saves more than just his farm animals. He saves all land animals. However, no account is given of how Noah got to far-flung regions of the earth to save, for example, the marsupials and other peculiar animals native to Oceania. The book of Genesis says nothing about this mystery. How did Noah save the bison of North America, the capuchin monkey of South America, and all the other peculiar species beyond count that live in other far-flung places, birds of paradise in Papua New Guinea, the albatross of the South Seas, polar bears, polar foxes, the snow leopard and Siberian tiger, the peculiar species of the Galapagos Islands, and so on? No account is given of how the insects were saved from the 190-day calamity. Insects have short lives, ranging usually from a few weeks to a few months. Moreover, the insects of Australia and America, for example, would have had to cross the ocean to get to Noah. Some insects, such as moths, once metamorphosed, often have short lives, sometimes of just 1 or 2 days, and the question then arises of how they ever got to Noah's Ark, completing the journey from the Americas and Australia in under a day or 2. And after reaching Noah, how did they survive the 40-day rain and 150-day flood and the return journey to the distant continents within their short lifespan? Additionally, all animals would need to sustain themselves for 190 days while adrift at sea. If the story is read literally, as the ancient Israelites would understand it, it is unfortunately providing no answers to such puzzles. Noah is said to have saved all land animals from the 150-day flood, but apparently not the cetaceans and fish. In case you may think, like the ancient Israelites might, that fish did not be saved, they could swim and survive, that is certainly not so if it rained so much that the entire surface of the earth was covered in water, because the salinity of the water would have been changed by the additional rainwater. The highest mountains are about 8,800 meters high, and the deepest seas about 11,000 meters deep, so the volume of the rain needed to cover the mountains would be approximately equal to the total volume of sea water. Subsequently, the salinity of the resulting water would have been reduced about 50% by the rainfall. Even small changes in water salinity would kill most fish of the seas. As for the freshwater fish, they would also perish because once the lakes and rivers were submerged in higher salinity waters, by mixing fresh water with seawater, their cells would lose much of their water content and most organisms would die. If you happen to be an unconvinced religious fundamentalist, you can do an experiment and take some organism from a freshwater lake and place it in seawater and come back 150 days later. Not only would the freshwater and seawater fish and cetaceans perish, but also mollusks, mussels, sea arthropods, and even most bacteria and unicellular organisms would become destroyed by the changed osmotic pressures. A flood that would cover all of the earth would likely kill most organisms that were not actively preserved. It would kill most organisms living in the seas, those of Antarctica, of Australia, in the Americas, and moreover, most of the plants. Indeed, the plants would also not survive for 150 days this new aquatic environment that they were not adapted to, neither having the salinity of the sea nor the salinity of freshwater environments, besides being completely submerged in water. But we are not told that Noah saved any of the plants, the fish, the insects, unicellular organisms, or the bacteria. No account is given of how species that were not taken onto the ark survived the flood. Besides, where did the surplus waters go after the end of the flood? Did they sink through the earth as if it were a flat land into the waters below the earth, according to the mythological worldview prevalent in the ancient Near East? The text says that the windows of the firmament opened and the waters above the firmament poured through, eventually flooding the land. Our spacecraft have traveled through the atmosphere and into outer space and have reached the planets of our solar system, but have found no solid firmament with windows. They did not have to open any doors to pass through. When they took photographs of the Earth was not a flat land at the bottom of the universe, but a planet rotating around the sun. The sun, moon, and planets have turned out not to be lamps attached onto a solid dome with waters above. They have independent trajectories and are not attached to anything. Despite protestations by religious fundamentalists that the Bible contains actual facts There is nothing said about protons, neutrons, or electrons, about gravitational fields, or about bacteria or viruses, fungi, or other forms of life. Unsurprisingly, there is nothing being said about anything that was unknown to the ancient Israelites. It is not just that the understanding of a round earth is missing. It is not just that the real age of the universe is not mentioned. It is not only that there are no biological observations or mathematical principles presented, or that the theory of evolution is not laid out. There is not even mention of the world's continents. Are they also not supposed to exist? Do American religious fundamentalists think that America does not exist? On the one hand, Christian literalists have not adopted some of the customs literally mentioned in the Old Testament, such as circumcision or certain dietary restrictions that have been adopted, for example, by Judaism and Islam. On the other hand, they selectively uphold other parts of the text, coming up with beliefs that are contrary to those of the Apostolic Churches. The literal reading of the Old Testament is as if one has just heard for the first time stories about people and events and has yet no other knowledge to compare them with, not even knowledge of the Christian Church, of the Trinity, of Christ. There is no understanding besides the simple reading of words. That is the essential problem of sola scriptura.